On behalf of the National Newspaper Publishers Association, we welcome all of our listening audience to another special program on education, raising awareness about the importance of public education, but particularly in the context of the COVID-19 pandemic, how we're able to still strive to close the education gap, and particularly to focus on African Americans and other people of color students, of what needs to be done to ensure that they get the highest quality education possible in America today. Today, we are joined with a long-standing principal, one of the most effective principals in America, Dr. Peggy Edwards-Jones, who's principal of Friendship Collegiate Academy in the early college campus in Washington, D.C. Uh, Dr. Peggy Edwards-Jones, thank you so much for joining the Black Press of America.
And thank you, Dr. Chavis, for having me.
How do you see from being a principal, and I know you've dealt with thousands of students in your career, but today and as we wind up 2020, going into 2021, how do you see the issues affecting particularly African American and other people of color students amidst this pandemic?
I would say that the pandemic has impacted our young people. Our young people, of course, have had a quick transition to online learning. And for some of them, they have done well. And for another group of our students, this has created a great disconnect and also a loss in their learning. Definitely, I would say that our students, though, are still persevering when it comes to this new way of learning. Is something that was thrown upon them at the last minute. And I would definitely say for students who need face-to-face instruction, students who need that adult-student interaction or even student-student interaction, this has tremendously impacted them.
Thank you. How's the digital divide? I mean, do students have broadband at home? Talk about the impact of distance learning, the requirements of distance education, but also the technical requirements. How's that from your perspective? What have you observed?
Yes, fortunately, in working with Friendship Public Charter Schools, we already had Chromebooks in every single classroom. And so in March, it was easy for us to go to a one-on-one where students were allowed to take their Chromebooks home. We also have provided broadband internet access for every single student who did not have it. So any student who didn't have it was given a hotspot to be able to use at home. So we took a week of spring break, and after that, our students have been active in instruction for the end of that school year. We had summer school, and we're back in school now.
Very good. So our audience can be better informed. What are the grade levels at Friendship Public Charter School?
Yes, so we serve students in grades 9 through 12, approximately about 543 students.
Very good. And what is the demographic, the racial breakdown?
We are 90% lower economic community, Title I students, and we have 99% African American.
Very good, very good. So you've had a long career. How long have you been a principal?
I became a principal in 2006, so that's 15 years. Okay. Yeah, I stepped away from being a principal for a little while to serve as the math director for our school district. But for the most part, I've either served as principal, head of schools, and or director of mathematics.
Great. I see you have a very vast knowledge of STEM and mathematics, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. How is, is this myth out there in our communities that African Americans and other people don't really grasp STEM? But can you talk to us, what's been the success in STEM programs at your charter school and what you've seen overall in the education landscape?
Absolutely. I think the biggest thing for minority students is having the opportunity for them. So at our campus, our students are allowed to select majors, and they have the choice of whether or not they would like to select a major. And students can major in health science, they can major in engineering, they can major in computer science within our building and take those courses to lead towards graduation. We've even offered dual enrollment courses in the STEM fields for our scholars, as well as AP courses. And so our overall goal is to make sure that our students have what they need to be college ready, and also to give them college courses while they're with us, which will even better prepare them for being successful at the college level. For students across our country, the biggest thing for our minority students is, again, access. And the more we provide opportunities for them to have access, we can see that our students can prevail just like any other group of young people in our country.
Yeah, so one of the things we wanted to focus on, and you have a lot of experience in this, is to make sure that what students get in elementary school, junior high school, really prepares them for college and beyond.
Mhm.
And I'm reading something of the success of your school. You've had an amazing percentage of your graduates to go on to college. Talk about how that was achieved.
Yes, absolutely. So we start from the day one when our scholars enter our school campus
And
and
you refer
really,
to them as scholars when they first arrive.
yes, we do. Yes. So we speak to our scholars about college starting day one. And um, and this is from the time that we're even doing open houses with our scholars. And so everything that we do is around preparing them for that. It could be public speaking opportunities, is of course making sure that they have those foundational skills when it comes to math, English, science, and social studies. It's also finding their niche, right? We know that even in DC, there's a high dropout rate. So really making sure that students can connect what they're doing in high school to what they want to do in the future is really important. Our counselors, our student support team also play a very important role. And so they work with our students. Right now, we're using a program called Naviance. And we, starting in ninth grade, instead of a homeroom, we have what we call an advisory session. And in those advisory sessions, students do self esteem, right? Goal setting, visionary, creating vision boards, looking at the best fit for college. We walk our students through the application process in college and applying for scholarships. And we try to give them a lot of opportunities to college access before they get to 12th grade. And so we even have a group of ninth grade students who take their first college courses with us. And
Oh,
so
great.
everything we do is around that. This week, we're having Alumni Day. And so we're having between 100 and 150 alumni who come back, and they do workshops for our students, usually in person. We also have a college fair where they are the reps for their colleges. We have forums, we have small group interaction, as well as panel discussions. And again, it is this alignment to our mission that our students have a responsibility even after they leave us to be productive citizens and actively contribute to the community, which is the community that they came from. So everything we do is around that. Right now, we have about 35% of our scholars who already received their college acceptance letters for the school year, and we're excited about that. We walk them through the FAFSA, and we also spend a lot of time with our parents. And so we have workshops for our parents monthly, to discuss with them what college access look like. And again, we start it from ninth grade.
Great. Well, one of the issues we looked at in the past is the interaction between parents in the school and, of course, their children in school, the students.
Mhm.
Um, I think, can you talk about the importance of having parental involvement in the education of children and families?
Absolutely. Our parents are most important. And even if, one thing that we've learned in this virtual setting is that some of the parents struggle when it comes to academics. Well, this is not necessarily the courses I took when I was in high school or I was in middle school. And so for our parents, it's really teaching them what are the tips that they can do to support their scholars and even be cheerleaders for their scholars and helping them to achieve. And so we have these conversations with our parents. We give them tips. We create pathways that they know how they can support their scholar. It doesn't always have to be that I have the academic background to support them, but I know how to get them the access that they need. And so parents are very important. Parents are our cheerleaders. Every day our students are home with their parents. And so when the parent is in the corner of our young people, then our young people are more willing to take risks and more willing to see a different pathway than what may have been the pathway for former people and their families.
Let's talk about the health of your students and how COVID-19 has had a disproportionate, devastating impact in many Black communities, Black families.
Mm-hmm.
What's been your experience? How the students, they're wearing masks, they're social distancing, they're washing their hands. How has the pandemic specifically impacted your school?
We have had students who have already lost loved ones. This has been a really trying year for many of our scholars. And so, it's kind of hard being distant from our scholars to support them in ways they need. But we have had times that we've had to go and do home visits and support some of our scholars that are dealing with grief and loss. We have about 45 students who come in 4 days a week. And these are students who were not attached. They were losing, we saw that they were very detached from learning and they weren't being successful. And so right now we have either our administrators, our deans of students, or dedicated aides, paraprofessionals who come in the classroom with them. They're still online with their teachers, but we give them additional support within the building. And those students are doing a wonderful job. It's 8 to 10 in a classroom. They're 6 feet apart. They have cubicles, which are glass when, they have snack time or lunchtime. The person in the classroom also have what we call data meetings with them weekly. And they're like the mentor. And they also help when it comes to making sure that they're going to tutoring, or if they're struggling in a subject, to get additional support from their families, from their teachers. So our students are coming along, but it was a difference for them, to be able to sit in the building with a mask on for 4.5 to 5 hours was very difficult for them. And it was something that they had to learn, and we had to have real conversations about. When we look at a community, sometimes we still see maybe about 30% of the population not wearing masks correctly, or still, congregating together. And so definitely we hope that in the conversations that we're having with our students weekly, that they're also having those conversations at home with their parents.
Thank you. We've seen some studies that say that there should be a monitoring of students in high school, and particularly use of social media, because sometimes when they have access, in the past, some schools wouldn't allow you to bring your cell phone to school. Now everybody is expecting to have your cell phone at school. But what's been your experience at Friendship in terms of, um, let me ask it this way: does social media enhance the education process, or does it serve as a distraction?
It could be either or. So one thing, and of course, everyone doesn't agree. We take cell phones. We have cell phone lockers. When our students come to school, they have to put their cell phones in the cell phone locker. This year, we did something a little different. We found out about the little pouch. So when they come in, they put their cell phone in the pouch. It is sealed. They can't get it back open until they leave at the end of the day with a magnet. We do use social media a lot with our students, though. We use Facebook, we use IG, we use Instagram, sorry. We use broadband with them, and we're on their social sites. Because social media is here, we try to teach our young people how to be responsible when it comes to social media. So we're probably all in their business when it comes to social media, because it can be used in a positive way. But teaching our young people how to use that in a positive way is really important. When it comes to academics, I would say, especially during the instructional day, and even our day for instruction runs from 8 to 1:30, and then students have time to work from 1:30 to 4. And some of that work still has to be after 4. So because we're using a lot of technology with our scholars, the time that they have for social media is probably after 7 o'clock in the evening. Because we're using a lot of technology platforms, but they're not necessarily social media when it comes to classroom instruction, unless it's something in their project-based learning projects that they have to launch on a social media site, for example. But I think that social media can be used, I mean, for some students, it can be used in a very positive manner. Like our students did a recruitment bank for getting people to sign up to vote. And they use social media to get the community out. And even during this pandemic, you know, they showed up to the school, they did booths in the front, and they used social media as an avenue for that. They're using social media for what they call Friendship for Change. And they're launching weekly discussions. And this has to do with, again, you know, police brutality, right? It has to do with, you know, all of these issues that they're seeing now, even in politics. So I definitely say it can be used in a positive manner. We have to teach our young people how to use it and to make sure that they're using it to impact the community in a positive way.
Well, you're teaching young people in, I guess, what's referred to as Generation Z.
Mhm.
And of course, they are very digitally connected. They're much more, have a grasp of technology, sometimes more than their parents and more than even the teachers.
Mhm.
How do you, because of your STEM background, do you begin to introduce the students the benefit of using technology to solve problems, to help them get ahead, even academically, rather than seeing technology as just something to play with?
Absolutely. Um, and I'm going to go back to one thing that you said, because we did find that even we were using things like Google Platform already within the school, but there was a learning curve that staff had in March. You know, some were very proficient, some weren't. And when you talk about where our staff grew from March into now, it's amazing, right? So we have taught our young people to use all of these different technology platforms for education. And so there's one of the things that I really feel has improved was student ownership of their learning over this distant learning time, because you know they're now using things like not just Google Classroom, but they're using things like Flipgrid, they're using things like Khan Academy, they're using Alex. So we have all of these different platforms that students are using, and teachers are also using them to increase student engagement. Because I mean, you've had to hear, you know, young people say, "I'm tired of Zoom."
Yes.
So they're able to use all of these different platforms for student engagement. We are still doing project-based learning. And so students are given a project and taught the curriculum through the projects in our STEM classes. And so they have to use that even to do that. Like students have to get together and they have to be able to collaborate even when the teacher's not there in order for them to complete their projects that they have to present.
Right. You know, that's very interesting. I'm glad you're sharing those details with us. My background, I come out of the civil rights movement, and I know how vital it was when I was a young high school. I got involved in the civil rights movement when I was in high school. I was the editor of my high school newspaper and writing editorials about the Vietnam War and just doing a whole lot of things. Activism actually helped me to be a better student. You
Absolutely.
know, it didn't distract. All of a sudden, what I was learning in the classroom had direct application to what was going on in the community at that time in terms of social justice and racial justice.
Mhm.
How are you finding your high school students in terms of their social consciousness?
I would definitely say that they have probably even become more conscious over the last year or two, just because of what's been happening in the community. They decided over the summer to start a group called Friendship for Change.
Hmm.
And this is a student ran program. They have hosted different forums. They have invited people from the community, and they've even invited some people from across the country to be on the panels for these discussions. And they are facilitated by the students. And of course, student participation. They have even invited students from outside of Friendship to participate. And that kind of led to even the voter registration that they did in DC, which was really interesting because they ended up signing up more adults than the high school students, which was really, interesting because they thought that, hey, we would just get all of the high school students, but there were a lot of adults who weren't either registered in DC or didn't know how to change their addresses. So that group is still up and running. And they have also been doing some other things, like they fed the community during Thanksgiving, even during the pandemic. Right now, they're doing a toy drive, which they're sponsoring 3 elementary and middle schools. And they're continuing their conversation about how they can play an active role in DC politics. And I'm very interested in seeing on Alumni Day this discussion with alumni about, how they feel that they could even become more active young people. But I would definitely say they're becoming more conscious. Even in advisories, we are having different articles, news articles and discussions that they're having. And it's really exciting to see them start leading some of the things that's happening, within the school.
Well, that's good news. One of the things I'm going to ask Stacy, our writer, he may be back in touch with you because I want to focus on the consciousness raising, the consciousness rising among Black youth. The call for Black Lives Matter is intergenerational, and actually it's become global. It's just not in the United States.
Absolutely.
So one of the things I wanted to ask you in terms of the worldview of your students, how are you dealing with the fact that you mentioned how conscious they are about DC and DC politics, DC issues. But what about the global community? We live much more, because of technology, we live much more in a global community. And of course, people of African descent, young people are searching out their lineages, their genealogies, the whole concept of people of African descent reuniting in some sense. Talk about what you've seen, or is there interest among your students in having a more global awareness of what's going on in the world?
Absolutely. And some of this is even tied into some of the coursework that our students are taking on the AP level and the dual enrollment level. So we have selected some of the courses that they're taking to be more global. And we see it happening there. We used to be very active in the student exchange, and we have just partnered with that happening. So we have a couple of students already, which I'm a little nervous about, who will be doing a student exchange even starting this summer. So I would definitely say it's not the entire school, but we do have a large body of the students who are looking at the global impact and learning more about it, and also even participating. We have tried to get many of our young people also active in national organizations. And I think that is also important because that gives them the ability to collaborate with young people across the country.
Okay, great. Well, our last question I wanted to ask you, um, what would you say, or what would you recommend to be the single most important factor toward closing the education gap in America between students of color and the larger society?
That's an interesting question. I can't say a single thing because there's a number of things that
Right.
we need to consider. We know that number one, it starts from a very young age, and even with the acquisition of language. And so making sure that we have programs that we can start at the youngest ages, 2 or 3 years old, where we're giving our young people the same opportunities that young people in affluent communities would get, maybe even in their household, is really important. Again, access for our students, because our students are very bright, just as bright, but making sure that they have access to all of these things, like when we talk about STEM careers and we talk about preparing them for college, and we're talking about global awareness and being able to do student exchanges. I think all of these things together is what helps which would make that gap decrease. We see pockets across the country where this is happening. And I think we really need to look at how we take these pockets and make this happen nationally.
Very good. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Peggy Edwards-Jones, principal of Friendship Collegiate Academy. Thank you for your leadership. Thank you for your longevity in the education field. And thank you for raising up the next generation of freedom fighters, of scholars, and people who will make our world a better place. On behalf of the Black Press, thank you.
And thank you for having me.